What a fun time to be an e-commerce business owner, a fashion brand, any sort of product-based business, right? And I am being totally sarcastic. I'm sure you've been on the edge of your seat watching these updates as they come in real time on the US tariffs. There's been no escaping it, even if you really were trying to avoid it. But let's face it, it's changing rapidly. Who knows which direction it's going to be in? But I think it's a really important lesson for any of us in business around, have we got all of our eggs in one basket? What do I mean by that? In this particular case, if your only customers, your only market was the US and you were manufacturing anywhere else other than the US, and let's face it, most people are, for a lot of people that's manufacturing in China, things might be feeling pretty scary right now. And it's a good reminder for us that we want to make sure that we are building businesses to last the distance. And in order to last the distance, we don't want to have all of our eggs in one basket. So what I'm doing today, I'm first going to unpack some of these latest US tariffs, whatever that is. By the time I finish recording this, they've possibly changed again. However, I'm going to share with you some strategies and ways to navigate it regardless of what it ends up being. Then I also want to touch on, what is your overall business strategy? How are we going to build a business that's sustainable for the long term so that we are not hugely impacted by things like tariffs, by COVID, lockdowns, all those different things, right? So let's just dive straight into it. Now, I did a little video and then shared it on Instagram around the fact that I have prepared all of these notes. If you're watching the video, you can see I've got some notes. I even attended a webinar yesterday with Austrade on the US tariffs, and it has actually changed again since then. So what is the latest? Where are we at? What even are these tariffs? So right now in front of me, I have got a list. Right now, China is 125%. Yesterday it was 104%. The day before that it was, 50%. So 125%. So right now, if you are a business that manufactures in China and ships or sells to the US, regardless of which country it comes via, the tariff is 125%. Now, when it comes to how you actually pay this tariff, what the process even looks like, I don't know. No one seems to be able to answer that. Even the Austrade webinar yesterday couldn't tell us that. But if this is your current situation, I feel for you, because that is ultimately you doubled your prices. And if you are in a situation where you have been producing and manufacturing in China and you've not yet received it, you're potentially going to have to pay double what you initially thought for that shipment. Now, I don't know when the actual cutoff date is. Like I said, things keep changing rapidly. I don't know if it's already kicked in for China into the US. There was some talk about the 2nd of May as being the D-Day. But again, things keep changing rapidly. And if this is you and your whole business relies on Chinese manufacturing and your customers are only in the US, I definitely recommend you find yourself a licensed custom broker. And in the show notes of this episode, I'm going to list a bunch of different resources and recommendations. And they're not personal recommendations as far as licensed brokers go. I haven't worked with anyone myself personally, but these are what I found on some websites in the US, some government websites. So what this means right now is that if you don't manufacture in China and you manufacture somewhere else but you sell to the US, it's on hold. It's on pause. I don't know if the 10% for Australia in particular has already kicked in or if that's on pause too. Again, it's so hard to keep up. But here are some ways that you can navigate it. And I guess first we should probably chat about the questions that you're probably asking yourself right now and what my personal recommendations are. If you are manufacturing in China and selling into the US, there's absolutely no way you can absorb that 125%. There's no way you have that kind of margin. You'll basically be losing money to the US. So you've got a couple of options here. You can raise your prices to the US first and foremost, because absorbing them is just out of the question. What sort of impact does that have though when we're raising our prices? Well, it's going to make customers less likely to pull out their credit card and want to spend. And I feel for you guys in the US. I know a lot of my listenership is in the US. This is going to make things a lot more expensive for you. So the ripple effect of that is that people will probably spend less money. And for those in business, that means you're going to make less sales. Your conversion rate's really going to drop. But there's absolutely no way you can absorb this and survive as a business. 125%. Come on. So you have no choice but to raise your prices. And whether you raise those prices at the storefront, right up front, where the advertised retail price is inclusive of those tariffs, or whether you are going to have it where the customer, when they go to pick up their shipment, has to pay it directly. I mean, there's pros and cons for both, but my biggest concern is if you don't include the tariffs into your retail price, it creates a potential problem where the customer goes to pick up their goods and is faced with this bill that they have to basically pay double what they've already paid, and they say, no, I don't want it. Then what happens? That customer will probably then go and ask for a refund or raise a chargeback with their credit card. And I know this happens a lot in the US. Chargebacks don't really happen in Australia so much unless you've got a really good reason there was a fraudulent experience. But in the US, it seems to be a bit of a more common practice where that's how they get refunds. They ask for a chargeback. And if you then have to deal with a chargeback as the business owner, that money is removed from your account plus a fee on top, a bank fee. So we don't want any chargebacks potentially happening. It also doesn't make for a great experience for the customer. So if you are doing that, you need to make sure you clearly communicate the process to the customer and say, hey, you're paying $100 with me, but when you pick it up, you're going to have to pay another $125, right? Or whatever that might be. So cannot absorb the costs. The options we have is to increase the price and inclusive of the tariffs, or keep your prices as is and then the customer pays the tariffs on pickup. But again, pros and cons for both. But ultimately, do I feel like your conversion rate is going to drop? Yes, sadly. Now, there is some nuances to this as well. Okay, so for those in the US, if you are manufacturing in China and shipping it into the US, those tariffs, hopefully you are paying just on your cost prices, what you have paid to the factory for that shipment. So that percentage will be less, or that dollar amount will be, not the percentage, the dollar amount will be less when you are paying the tariffs based on your cost prices versus someone, say, in Australia, manufacturing in China, who is then shipping individual items into the US, where that tariff will be calculated on the retail price, the price that you have to declare on the outside of the package. Now, I know from years and years in e-commerce, yes, there's some dodgy little ways you can get around this. You can put a reduced dollar amount on the package. So let's say a case study, Australian company, ladies fashion, sells $100 dresses to a US customer. The customer has ordered this $100 dress, and then now it was manufactured in China. They're now going to have to pay that 125% tariff, whether you on your website bump up the price to $225, or whether you send it, they've paid you $100, they pay the other $125 to customs at the other end. You do have the option of reducing the amount on that commercial invoice. However, the customer can often see that reduced number. So if you turn around and go, you know what, that dress cost me $25, I'm just going to put on $25 on that commercial invoice to send it to the customer. And then the customer sees the cost price was only $25, but they've paid $100. They're going to freak out, even though you are somewhat doing them a favor, because then they'll only have to pay the tariff based on that dollar amount, that $25 amount you've put on the commercial invoice. They're going to get the product and go, this only cost $25. Are you joking? I've paid $100. So it's messy, right? It's messy. So like I said, there's a few different ways to do it. If you are in the US, I would be absolutely making sure that you are, whichever way you do it, you are paying the tariffs on the cost prices, not on that final retail price that you are sending it to the customer. So that would look like having it shipped to you and then you fulfill it, whether that's you yourself personally out of your spare room or garage, or whether that's through 3PL. This scenario is also what I'd recommend for Australian-based businesses producing in China, selling it into the US. Investigating some third-party fulfillment or 3PL options in the US, where you will send your inventory en masse or a bulk amount of inventory to a fulfillment house in the US, so they will pick and pack the orders direct to the customer. Because by doing it this way, when you import that inventory into the US, you will be paying your tariffs based on that cost price, not that final retail price. So again, a percentage is the same, but instead of paying it on $100 per individual sale, you're paying it based on that $25 per unit. And if you're importing 1,000 units, well, then it's, whatever that maths looks like. So investigating third-party fulfillment for those that are outside of the US but continue to sell to the US is something I would investigate. And again, I used a 3PL in the US, but probably 8 years ago, and I can't even remember their name, but there are so many. I recommend you go and do some research and see who other people might have been working with and what they recommend. But they're out there. There's plenty of them out there, okay? So that's the first thing I'd be like, if continuing to sell to the US is a crucial part of your business, investigating third-party fulfillment is my number one recommendation you go away and do. And also finding a licensed custom broker or freight forwarder and having a conversation with them and see if you can engage their services to help you navigate this wild west as it currently is now. So that's the first thing. Stepping back from that, it also tells us we need to diversify. More than anything, this is a bit of a wake-up call. It's a reminder that we can't build our businesses just around one factory, one manufacturer, one country, and be dependent on selling to just one market or even through one sales channel or marketing channel like Facebook ads. We don't want to have all of our eggs in one basket. We want to have a long-standing business that can survive the ups and downs and craziness that we have got going on, even over the past 5 years. So what does that look like? If you're manufacturing in China and you're selling to the US, it might be worth starting to look at other countries that have a lower tariff. It could look like India, it could look like Indonesia. And I've got India's 26% as of yesterday, Australia's 10%. But those other countries are on hold. I did have some numbers for Vietnam. I think it was quite high. I think it was about 36% off the top of my head, and Indonesia. So looking at, okay, whose tariff is lower, what sort of manufacturing capabilities they have, and start to have conversations with them, start to sample with them to see what they're like. Because it's good to have a diversity when it comes to your manufacturing partners. I even say this, even if there wasn't tariffs, even if everything was going great, I don't want you to have only one sole manufacturer. You're in a really risky position. We want to have a number of manufacturers that we can tap into. The second thing is, are all of your sales coming just from one region, like the US, especially if you are a business that's based outside of it? If you're an Australian business and the bulk of your sales come from the US, it's probably not a great position to be in for this exact reason than what we're experiencing right now. So looking at other markets, other countries, other regions, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Europe, UK, whatever, right? We need to start thinking strategically about what are some other regions that we could tap into. And then we also want to make sure that not all of our sales are coming through one single marketing channel to drive that revenue. We don't want all of our sales only coming from Facebook ads, because I've experienced this firsthand with all of the iOS changes and algorithm changes where my ads were going gangbusters, and then overnight they've flicked the switch and the whole game had changed. The ROASs that we used to get were, a thing of the past, right? We want to make sure that we've diversified our marketing channels. We want to make sure that we've diversified the regions that we sell to. And we also want to make sure that we've got diversification in our supply chain, in our manufacturing, and even in the country. So those are my high-level top recommendations for you right now. The next thing you need to look into is harmonized tariff codes. Now, I've included these links in the show notes for you to go deep diving into what this looks like. But I've had to do this before, and from memory, it was when I was selling on Amazon. These harmonized tariff codes are very specific. To give you an indication, it's based on country of manufacture, it's based on the type of product or garment, it's even based on whether or not it's woven versus non-woven. So you will have to go and have a dig around to figure out what are the most relevant harmonized tariff codes, because these codes, I believe, you will have to state on that commercial invoice or on that shipping label when you start shipping things into the US. So you need to figure out what yours are. And there is, like I said, show note links on where to go investigating it. And if this is totally overwhelming, like I said, try and find a licensed custom broker or a freight forwarder to help you. If you are only selling to the US and you're producing in China, this is your little nudge to go and start exploring other countries. I also definitely want you to go and start exploring some 3PL. And if I find some great 3PL recommendations, I'll certainly share them with my audience. There's no question there. But ultimately, I want you to look at your overall strategy. What sort of business do you want to create? What sort of lifetime or life cycle do you want this business to experience? Do you need to build a better strategy? And if you do, this is something I can absolutely help you with in my 90-day e-commerce scaling strategy session. This is a one-on-one 90-minute session where we unpack what's going on in your business. We unpick all of the stitching and we figure out what's going on, and then we re-stitch it together in a better way. We look at things like your supply chain, your marketing channels, your diversification in all of the different areas, right? It's something that is so crucial, and it's something that really needs to be done. And for a lot of business owners, whether you're an e-commerce or service-based business, we're so busy in the business, doing the do, getting that next email scheduled, tweaking our ads, thinking about that next production. We don't often step back and go, hang on a minute, what is my overall strategy here? Where am I even headed? What is the end goal here? Because we're generally being super reactionary and we're the mouse on the wheel, just keep on running. And then we get to a point where we go, oh no, a wobble like this, an economic change, a challenge, a pandemic, and we are then left going, oh no, is this the end of my business? So if you need help pulling apart your strategy and building out your next 90-day strategy, please come on over and book one of my one-on-one 90-minute sessions. I only release a couple of these a month. I've only got 2 left for April as I record this, and I would love to help support you in figuring out how to navigate this new tariff system. All right, I hope you found this episode helpful and gained some insights. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows? But the best piece of advice I can give you is prepare for the worst and hope the best happens. All right, I'll see you next week. Bye for now.